archetypal hero stories is the story of a leader as an iconoclast. Now, of course, in the building of a personal brand, these are extreme examples, and none more extreme, I would say, than Gordon Ramsay. And so story two, a second approach to this building of a brand, is a hard-headed, driving personality. Branson succeeded by being a late entrant into many markets with apparently a personable character and a nice personality, but nobody could argue that Richard Branson is not a driving personality. With Chanel rejecting, and a great story of Coco Chanel rejecting the dominant view at the time of women should be covered head to toe, and you know, for all that one might complain about what they see on YouTube, and I had the displeasure of watching the Ramsay Tracy Grimshaw in preparation for understanding this. I had the unpleasant experience of watching the Ramsay Tracy Grimshaw debacle. No one can argue that Gordon Ramsay isn't a hard-headed, unpleasant on the surface type of a guy, but there must be something going on there because he has retained 80% of his staff, and quality staff over 10 years. So part of this, one of the other stories is the tough but fair, never give up approach to building to going about the business. One of my, I would say, personal heroes, but let's say, is the story of Mick Malthouse. Not so, I mean, the story of this year with the grand final, no problems. But I'd watched last year, and this was of course a year ago. I'd watched last year that guy loving the one that he lead, hard as nails, tough to deal with somewhere else, but you know, best friend or hard friend to the people that are working with him. So the leader as an iconoclast is a key argument. One of those other stories being not afraid to fight the system. And one might not be able to tell it, but the skull and crossbones was one of the early incarnations of the Apple legend. So the Apple legend was a rebel with a cause. I will take the time to show this. It's a blast from the past, which I really quite like.
January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh, and you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
So with a given incarnation, there's the incarnation of Apple, and perhaps they changed their strategy of their brand authenticity over the years, but that rebel with a cause approach to being authentic. Down here is of course one of the Get a Mac, you know, Windows. I've been telling you fibs for the last however long. One of those other YouTubes, which I won't show, but and a beauty engineered forever approach. You know, I'm fighting the system and I'm working on behalf of the small person. One of the other approaches that we can run to is the idea of sticking to one's roots. So big argument there being about Rip Curl and Billabong going into fashion, going into the fashion product category rather than sticking to one's roots. I'd call it perhaps a concern. Max Schubert building his personal brand and the Grange brand at the same time. He believed in his product and he stuck to his roots. As I understand, Grange Hermitage for a number of years was made on the sly in fermenting tanks that nobody knew what was being produced in there. Of course, Steve Jobs was sacked from Apple, and so examples of where it went wrong. Where it went wrong was with Southcore trying to exploit Grange even recently, and Apple creating a multitude of products and trashing what the brand stood for. So something worth us keeping in mind for ourselves as well. So the second category of personal story. And as Andrew had mentioned, I am mindful of your valuable time. So I will move through. We'll finish these 7 stories of authenticity. I'll speak about the Keller's approach to positioning, and a quick look at some of the tools, and still have this completed within the promised 45 minutes. So the second range is the second set of stories is the solving difficult dilemmas approach to building a personal brand. So one of the ways can be the loving of the doing. When you're a carpenter making a beautiful chest of drawers, you don't put a piece of plywood on the back. This was somebody building. It isn't about the death of Steve Jobs. It is not meant as a tribute to him, but I keep coming back to it. I wrote this material, most of this material before Steve died. And it was him that said the aesthetic, the quality needs to be carried all the way through. I've seen examples of personal brands and companies that carry that personal brand in Villy, spending his time in Cafe de Villy down there at Mile End, frying chips. Villy would not be saying the words, I don't know how it will help, but he knows that being close and the loving of the doing, running a cafe, he is a pastry chef deep down. Peter Jackson wouldn't reuse props for the Ring trilogy. The argument being that weapons would have changed or over the history of the trilogy, and he wouldn't reuse props. And I would argue that probably the same thing was done for the Star Wars trilogy. So the love of craft, the loving of doing the job. Staying an amateur. These 2 guys up there, Justin and Andre of the Quaff Boys. They basically, their symbol is a blue and white combi van. For 5 years, at least for a number of years, they with the back end out of their pants were driving around, visiting winemakers, putting up YouTube videos called The Road To, and it was a road to wine. They loved what they were doing. I've got the Altoids down there because of a story told about one of what would happen to the Altoids brand if it got caught by a large marketing firm. So a quick look at this. The value of being an amateur and the story, the authentic story of being an amateur is we're unpaid, we're working by choice. Yes, we're untrained, but that's a value. So there's a story we can tell there that talks to their own authenticity and unencumbered by grown-up concerns. So Procter & Gamble, was a senior manager of Procter & Gamble, said this Altoids, this quirky, authentic little brand of breath-freshening mint in the US, if Procter & Gamble owned it, it would be P&G'd out of